the function of the lymphatic system is to help you absorb and return excess interstitial fluid to the bloodstream, absorb fat from small intestines, transport it into the bloodstream, produce, maintain, and distribute lymphocytes, and defend against pathogens and disease. So basically, like, it's helping to fight off all the foreign invaders that are trying to enter your body.
Mm-hmm. And again, maintain homeostasis, as you already know.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about this later?
Here, I'm not going to go over these because, like, they're all highlighted and they're basically definitions, but these are the lymphatic, some parts to the lymphatic system. She highlighted them in orange boxes.
Yeah, the ones that you, like, she wants you to know.
Yeah, so primary, these ones are the primary, and then on the next slide, it's the secondary organs.
Mm-hmm.
So just get a general idea of what those things do.
Mm-hmm.
And moving on, so the immunity is the body's ability to defend itself against infectious agents, foreign cells, and even abnormal body cells. So again, we're trying to fight off those foreign invaders, just have everything healthy in our body, maintain homeostasis. So then the three lines of defenses that the foreign invaders are going to try to get into your body is first is the physical and chemical barriers. Mm-hmm. Second is the general defenses, and third is the specific defenses. And then we'll describe like non-specific versus specialized after. So.
Yeah, and I know we're going kind of fast, but this is kind of like an overview of our last session. And there should be a recording coming out of our last session, so we'll send it out to you guys whenever it's like ready. So like, yeah, this is just going to be like super brief.
Yeah, we want to get to the last two lectures since it was kind of new.
Yeah, the most recent. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then again, like, we're just going off the slides, so you can always pull these slides up again and review them yourself. Mm-hmm. So then the first one, okay, going back to the three lines of defenses, the first one is that the foreign invaders are going to try to get through your physical and chemical barriers. So physical barriers are like your skin. Here it says skin, and then that's like the first line of defense, right? Because it's trying to get through your skin. And then like here's all the other ones. Like the chemical barriers are tears and saliva and like other
stomach. Yeah.
But it's going to try to get through those first. Okay. And then so after it gets through your first line of defense, it'll go to your second line of defense, which is general defenses. And these general defenses consist of like defensive cells and proteins, fever, inflammation, and phagocytes. Mm-hmm. So let's see, general defense. Yeah, the second. We'll scroll down, and then another like general defense would be like the complement system. Here, she has a whole slide on it, so I would think that this is important. Just remember that the complement system is for bacteria only. Mm-hmm. So so the complement is like a key to the bacteria, and it's gonna poke holes around the bacteria so that it could burst. And then once that bacteria is bursted, then like all of the good guys can come in and attack it, and that bacteria is gonna die.
Yeah, here's like a little picture of it, if it helps. So moving on.
Yeah, and then so again, general defense is a fever. So what happens when you have a fever? Your body temperature increases, but why does it increase? It's because it's trying to burn off or kill off those bacteria. So your body heats up to burn it off. And so during a fever, you should get plenty of rest, feed your fever, and then
starve a cold.
Yeah, starve a cold.
Okay.
And then the next general defense is inflammatory responses. So like a bee, okay, let's have an example of a bee sting where you get stung by a bee, and then like all of the poison is going to get into your body, and those are the foreign invaders. So when that bee sting happens, like it's going to start in swelling and giving pain and redness and heat. That's all of your body's general defense response to fight off that foreign bacteria. General defenses again, phagocytes, they are white blood cells, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, white blood cells. So those are the good guys. They're gonna release neutrophils and macrophages. They're white blood cells, so they're just gonna come in whenever they're needed.
And yep. So moving on to the third one, which is the specific defenses. So basically all you really need to know about this one is that pathogens have, like, they produce like antigens. So like that's why you take antibiotics, or your body produces antibodies to kind of kill these pathogens or antigens. So like moving on to this one, yeah, so each defense using a different type of lymphocyte. So yeah, anyways, so this one is kind of like the same. Actually, we'll talk about this first and then we'll go back to that. So there's two types of specific defenses in your body. There's the B lymphocytes and there's also the T lymphocytes. And so the B lymphocytes, they mature in your bone marrow. Yeah, remember B for bone. And then the B lymphocytes, they secrete antibodies to neutralize the antigen. And so remember, antigen is the same thing as pathogens. And so, yeah, memory B cells. So what this means that it remembers like how to attack an antigen, if that makes sense. So like say you were attacked by an antigen when you were like 5, and then when you grow up it'll like, or like, and then like a few years later you get attacked by the same antigen. These cells help remember how to attack, if that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, so moving on to T lymphocytes. So these guys mature in the thymus, T for thymus, and these guys, they do not secrete antibodies or they attack directly. Yeah, and so these guys have like helper T cells and cytotoxic T cells. And so the helper T cells, these guys basically tell other cells how to respond to or attack the antigen. So like it's basically like the boss, and it like tells which cells to attack. And then the cytotoxic ones, these are the ones that attack and destroy the, I guess, the antigen. And so going back to this slide, so a self-MHC marker labels the body's cell as a self or friend, and then an antigen is a molecule often on the surface of a pathogen that the immune system recognizes as non-self or foe. And I think this one, I guess this image is basically saying like our cells have MHC markers that help distinguish, like, or in our cell membranes to help distinguish which ones are like good, I guess, like cells, and like bad bacteria cells, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It says like bacteria doesn't have this MHC marker, so that's how our body knows how to attack them.
Yep.
Yeah, so just let me know if you have any questions on that. I know I went through that kind of briefly, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on. Oh,
actually, sorry, the last thing on the immunity is the like differentiating them between specific and non-specific.
Yes.
So, because this could be a test question. So she could ask like, what is general defense a non-specific or specific? Is specific, or specialized is the same thing as specific. So then what that means is that these first two, they're non-specific, saying that like they'll attack anything that comes in. Mm-hmm. But then the specific defenses, those are when the B and T cells come in because they need like more fighters. They need to more fighters to attack the whatever's like entering your body.
So I guess moving on to reproductive. If there are
Yes, specialize is the same as specific. So.
Okay. So I guess like you guys should be familiar with the vocab now, I guess. So gametes, remember these are the ones that are like the sperm and the egg. Gametes are basically like, I guess like the ones that have your like DNA, I want to say. And then the gonads are the ones that are basically like the reproductive organs, so like testes and then the ovaries. So the gonads make the gametes. Okay, yeah, so reproductive system functions. So yeah, so it produces and protects and nourishes the gametes, and then these are just like also like additional functions of the reproductive system. Just kind of like know like briefly what they are, and like how they're connected to each other. So like trigger puberty, maintain reproductive ability, stimulate secondary sex characteristics, produce hormones involved in sexual maturation and general homeostasis. So, yeah.
She does have 4 functions on there, so that could be a multiple choice question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, the gonads, they produce the gametes, and the gametes are the sperm and the egg. The ducts transport the gametes and fertilize eggs. Yeah, accessory glands. Yeah, facilitate gamete production and survival, supporting structures, help deliver and support the gametes. So yeah.
Okay, let's move. So basically this lecture is comparing the male versus the female reproductive system. So we'll start off with the male, and the male's function is to produce, store, and develop sperm to female reproductive system. And then there's a whole bunch of these what's called org structures for the reproductive system. So get yourself familiar with these. The slide above shows where it is, but then what you really need to know is like what does that organ do, because then she'll have that as like probably a matching, I would guess, on the test. Like what does the testes do, what does the ejaculatory duct do? So just review that slide for definitions.
Yep. And then these are more.
And then yeah, the 3 glands, I would familiarize yourself with these. So like seminal vesicle is the fructose and semen. Seminal vesicle, fructose and semen. And then prostate gland secretes milky alkaline fluid. Remember, that was to like help the sperm get into a comfortable environment, like not too acidic, not too basic. So that alkaline fluid would help through the prostate gland. And then the bulbourethral gland secretes and lubricates mucus, cleansing the urethra. So making sure that the sperm goes through safe.
Yep.
And then also the hormones of the male is testosterone, LH, and FSH. Yeah, so testosterone, that's the function of the testosterone. It controls growth and function of male reproductive tissues, stimulates aggression and sexual behavior, and produces secondary sexual characteristics. And in males, the LH produces testosterone or stimulates production of testosterone, and FSH indirectly stimulates sperm formation. So you'll see later that LH and FSH is in women too, but then they have like different
like functions kind of, right? Excuse me.
So what is this slide? This one?
These are just like,
oh yeah, it's just showing like where GnRH and LH and FSH are made. It's in the brain, in the pituitary gland. And let's see. Yeah, it's just showing you where it is in the brain.
Yeah, anyways. So moving on to the female. Yeah, so females, they're more complex. So there's the external reproductive organs and the internal reproductive organs. So I feel like these are pretty self-explanatory. Yeah, so internal reproductive organs, the vagina, cervix, uterine or fallopian tube, fimbriae, I don't want to botch that. So ovary and uterus, and then these ones, the green is the external reproductive organs. So these are just like parts of the female reproductive system. So the ovaries, these are the ones that produces the eggs, also known as, or the immature eggs, also known as the oocytes. Yeah. And the ovaries also secrete estrogen and progesterone. The uterus is its function is to where the fertilized egg grows, and if you remember, fertilized means just like when the sperm meets the egg. And then this is where the endometrium and myometrium is, and if you remember, the endometrium is like the lining of the uterus. There's the cervix, which basically allows the baby to exit, but like you don't really have to know that. I want to say it's more of like a general thing. Yeah, and then vagina, and then the labia majora and minora.
Mm-hmm.
And then the clitoris. Yeah, these are just like parts of the vagina. So I know this is like a little kind of confusing, the female hormone cycle. So I guess the main thing you need to know is basically all the hormones involved in like the hormonal cycle, and like basically the hormonal cycle is like when females have their like periods. And so basically what this entire like chart is saying, and like what this is saying, is that at the beginning of the menstrual cycle, your brain releases this GnRH, right? And then so that causes the pituitary gland to release the FSH, which then helps develop the ovarian follicle. And then, as you know, like the ovarian follicle includes the egg and other like cells that secrete estrogen. Yeah, so follicle secretes estrogen, which builds up the endometrium, which is your uterine lining, right? Uterus lining.
Mm-hmm.
And then so basically the FSH travels down to the ovaries, which stimulate the ovarian follicle. And then so that causes high estrogen, and then I guess this is kind of brief, but like basically what's happening here is as the follicle matures, the hypothalamus secretes more of this GnRH, and then once the more GnRH is secreted, this stimulates the pituitary to secrete the LH. So that's what this step is between here. Just basically just know that as the follicle matures, there's more GnRH, and then that causes the secretion of the LH, and then LH is responsible for like ovulation or like the release of the egg. So like when your period occurs. Yeah. And then the corpus luteum secretes estrogen and progesterone, which affects the lining of the uterus. And then just know that progesterone production stops, which leads the hormone levels to decline, and then menstruation, and then the cycle starts again. So yeah, that's kind of like a brief overview. This just shows like how long each day, like, or each, I guess, like step of the cycle takes.
The main one here is the ovulation at day 14.
Yeah, and that's like the release of the egg, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then so this is just like a cool little chart that helps us like memorize, or helps you like remember. So ovulation, yeah, it makes sense because LH spikes, and LH, as you remember, causes the release of the egg. So yeah, just give it a brief look through. yeah, I feel like she wouldn't be too in depth with it, but just know like the general like steps, I want to say.
Mhm. This is where like once the fertilization happens, we're going to start like growing a baby, right? So there's the early embryonic phase, and this is weeks 3 through 8, and then the fetal phase, which is weeks 9 through birth. So the difference between embryonic phase is where it's like very cellular, and then the fetal phase is where it's starting to have like facial features and organs develop.
Yeah.
Again, fertilization, sperm is in the female, and then it goes through the fallopian tubes, and then they form a zygote during fertilization.
Yeah. And zygote is when the sperm meets an egg. So.
And then, okay, so here there's like 3 different kinds of like cell development, or yeah, there's like 3 different stages. So cleavage is where the cells are like dividing. It's just constantly dividing, cleavage. And then differentiation is when the cell is becoming specialized. So there's features that are like making it the way that the cell is going to be. And then morphogenesis, like remember morphing. So the formation of organs and tissues during development. So morphing into organs and tissues.
Yeah. So yeah, to become causes a cell to become specialized. So it's just another word for like like the cells, like I guess like doing different things basically. Like as they like mature, they find like different purposes, if that makes sense. Anyways.
And then here, yeah, so again, the cell is once the cleavage is happening, the cell division, morula is the solid massive stem cells, and then the blastocyst is the hollow ball of cells, and then the cells begin to specialize.
Yeah, here's
So,
like a cool little chart or picture.
I would say like the morula and blastocyst is part of cleavage. It's just like different stages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So blastocyst implants in the uterine endometrium.
This is just, it's still going through through the female.
Yeah, this is just like kind of like the development of this is when the sperm already meets the egg, and then the blastocyst is like the start of like, I don't want to say child, but like the start of like development, if that makes sense.
You know, you're good.
Yeah, like the blastocyst implants into the uterine endometrium, and then this is where like the baby grows.
Okay, embryonic stage, differentiation, and morphogenesis. So this is after cleavage, after all the cells are starting to divide. It's going to start forming into the baby. So embryonic development, weeks 3 through 8. And then the embryonic disc has 2 cell types, which is the endoderm and ectoderm. Endo is inside, ecto is outside. And then in the middle is the mesoderm. So meso, middle. I would say for this slide, the formation, it has all of those organ, or like those what do you call it, the features, the structures. Okay, the structures. And I would say like get yourself familiarized with those, and like what do they do, because that could be matching as well. Like what does the yolk sac do? What does the amnion sac do? What does the umbilical cord do? And stuff like that. So
Yeah, she also put like a lot of like like a lot of, I guess, like information on the placenta. So like just know that it's like a large diffusion filter. It allows like the exchange of nutrients and gases and antibodies. If you remember antibodies, things that fight antigens. Anyways, embryonic waste and hormones from like the mother and the child. And like so like toxic substances, HIV, alcohol, recreational drugs, prescription drugs. So like if like say like a mother like takes these in or like has these, this can like totally affect the growth of the child, because the placenta is like anything that the mom has, the baby will also have, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Okay, so
Okay, and then yeah, that's still growing. The baby's still growing, but weeks 5 through 8 here it just breaks it down into the weeks.
yeah, just know that week 5 through 8, like embryo looks more like humans, and then like arms, legs, hands, and feet grow, or are, I guess, like, yeah, grow. And then week 7, male and female genitals are development, excuse me. Yeah, so if Y chromosome is present, then male. If Y chromosome is not present, then female. I don't know if she's went over this, but you know that the 2 chromosomes that the female have are X and X. So like if there's no Y, then it's female, and it means that the testosterone is absent. And then the female organs are formed, and then the male is XY chromosomes, right? So the Y chromosomes forms testes, and then the testes secrete the hormones, the androgens, which we'll go over later, and then like which form the penis and the scrotum. So yeah.
And then after the embryonic stage, we'll move on to the fetal stage, and that begins at week 9. And here, the nutrients and waste diffuses down to the concentration gradient between the fetus and the mother. Like, so more nutrients is being exchanged in order to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And then by week 38, it's ready for birth.
All right, so moving on to ambiguous sex determination. So true hermaphrodites are extremely rare. Yeah, so this is just like kind of like the backstory of what it is, I guess, or like the history behind it. But hermaphrodites are when an individual has both female and male sex characteristics, so like their organs basically. Yeah, so intersexed individuals produce hormones based on genetics. So intersexed females produce estrogen, and then intersex males produce testosterone. But the brains are either male or female. And so, as we mentioned briefly earlier about androgens, and so androgens are basically male sex hormones, and like those include testosterone and DHT. And so we know that testosterone functions in sperm development and secondary sex characteristics, so like pubic hair and like whatnot. And it is a precursor to DHT. So what this means is that DHT triggers the development of male genitals, right? So, but testosterone needs to be there, like it needs to be present for DHT to, I guess,
Actually work.
occur, basically, or triggered, if you will. And then so there's 2 kinds of intersex. So there's the defective androgen receptor, and then there's the defect in the enzyme that converts the testosterone to DHT. So for the defective androgen receptor, see if my notes. Yeah, so these guys, they produce androgens, so like the male hormone, but they can't like lock onto the cells. So then the genitals and the secondary sex characteristics won't develop, if that makes sense. So basically, like, they won't have, like, I guess, their genitals and secondary sex characteristics. And then for the defect in enzymes that converts the testosterone to DHT, so this means that the body only produces the testosterone but not the DHT. So then the testosterone, as we've mentioned earlier, specifies the testes, and these intersexed individuals have testes and secondary characteristics associated with testosterone. But since they can't convert the testosterone to the DHT, then they won't have a penis or a scrotum, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just let us know if you don't get anything in the chat. But so both of these do not have genitals, basically. Like people who have the defective androgen receptors and the defect in enzymes that converts the testosterone to DHT.
Yep, that's about it for that lecture.
Mhm.
I would say the most important things for that is the kind of the weeks.
Yeah, and like specifically what happens in each week.
Mm-hmm.
So week 5 and 8, the arms, legs, and hands are, I guess, formed. And then week 7, the male and female genitals develop. And then like, yeah, so like differentiation of like XX and XY chromosomes, and like how the hormones, I guess, are interacting when that happens.
Mm-hmm. And then the differentiation between the embryonic phase and the fetal phase.
Yeah, I'll definitely know those.
So mitosis, again, this is just to make identical cells. And it's going to go through these series of steps, which you can refer to as like PMAT, prophase, prometaphase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. This is going to be on a test for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Which stage is doing what? Which stage is the cell, the chromosomes lining up in the middle? Stuff like that.
So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned earlier, mitosis produces 2 identical diploid daughter cells. So what is happening here? Okay, I guess I can explain it. So as we know, mitosis means, there's a little tab. Yeah. So mitosis means producing 2 of the same ones, right? So essentially you are producing 2 of like 2 cells. Just imagine these are chromosomes. So 2 of the same things, right? And so these are all of the, I guess, like the phases. So in prophase, we know that the chromatins, which is like these things right here, they wrap around the histones. Sorry, these guys are right here. The chromatins wrap around the histones. And then in prometaphase, the nuclear envelope dissolves. So like you see this like red thing in prometaphase, all you need to know is that this thing like dissolves, and then these mitotic spindles are like, I guess, like wrapping around them, but that's more like in depth, I feel like, so you probably don't have to know that. And then in metaphase, the chromosomes are aligned. You see here there's a line. And then in anaphase, it's when the chromosomes are pulled apart to the opposite ends of the cells. You see this here, like this guy is like pulled to the, I guess, to the opposite ends, if that makes sense. Yeah. And then telophase is when the nuclear envelope, I guess, reforms. You see this kind of like red thing that's like forming again. And then cytokinesis is when the cytoplasms start pinching off. So like this part right here, in cytokinesis, they're completely like cleaved. And so, yeah, so what this means is that they're identical cells. Yeah, so just going over briefly again, prophase, chromatins wrap around the histones. So this is the chromatins wrap around the histones. And then the prometaphase is when the nuclear envelope dissolves. The mitotic spindles are like, I guess, like reaching out more to the chromosomes. And like, yeah, and then
they're attaching.
Yeah, they're attaching to the chromosomes. And then metaphase is when chromosomes are aligned, courtesy of the mitotic spindles. Anaphase, it's like breaking apart. There's like they're like moving to, the chromosomes are pulled to opposite ends of the cell. Telophase is when the nuclear envelope reforms. You see this like red stuff, that's the nuclear envelope. And then cytokinesis is when the cytoplasm is pinching off. And that produces identical cells in interphase. So yeah.
All right, here is where it gets a little bit more complicated, but it's the same concept as mitosis, but meiosis is producing 4. So you know how in mitosis we only made 2? So now we have to divide those 2 again to make 4. But okay, let's see.
Sorry, let me, okay.
That's okay.
Okay.
So this chart, yeah, I really like this chart. It looks confusing, but just like break it down the middle, because it says meiosis 1 on one side and then meiosis 2 on the other side. So meiosis 1, like you have all of your it's the same thing again. So like prophase, you have all of your chromosomes in there, but one is from the male and then the other is from the female, correct? Yeah, that's why they're different colors. So the blue and the red, like that's one is from the male, one is from the female. And then the metaphase, they're both lined up in the middle again.
Yeah, kind of like the same.
Yeah, it's the same thing. And but then the only difference is that like the legs are going to cross over. So on the third circle, it has the legs like, yeah, see right there, like the blue is crossing over with the red, and then they're going to like permanently cross over. So this, if you read on number 3, it says crossing over offers even more genetic variation. At the ends of these chromosomes are close enough to swap material. So then they're going to swap, and then they're going to create more genetic variation. So like this is kind of helping determine like, oh, is this cell going to be a female, or is this cell going to be a male? Yeah, so we'll continue like dividing through anaphase.
Yes.
Telophase, same concept as mitosis. They're going to pull apart. And so then you're going to have 2 cells right there.
In the end of telophase 1.
Yeah. At the end of meiosis 1. And then since we have it, like if you see in the picture of telophase, like it's still in the chromosome form. You need to break that even more in half, so then they're just one,
like single.
One strand. Yeah, one strand. So if you compare it to the telophase 2, like they're individual strands, and then telophase 1, they're like in a chromosome form. So you still need to break that in half.
Yes.
So that's where meiosis 2 comes in. And then you're going to go through the same steps, is that without like the crossing over, because it already crossed over, you just need to break these apart even more. So it's going to start at prophase, like those are your 2 cells that it's left with. And then your metaphase are going to line up again. Anaphase, pull it apart. Telophase, they're going to be 4. There's going to be 4 individual cells with the individual strands.
Yeah, so it helps meiosis, like, so they're basically kind of like the same concepts, like anaphase, like the chromosomes are being pulled apart at opposite ends. Telophase is when like things like, I guess like the cell starts to like cleave, so like it starts to split. And then, but like, so the main difference between meiosis 1 and meiosis 2 is that like there's like swapping of like DNA here. Like if you see like even more closely, like parts of this one has like red, parts of this has blue, and then parts of this, the red one has blue, and parts of this like blue chromosome has red. Whereas this one, they're already like, they're just splitting. like in the middle. Like for meiosis too, like they're just splitting. Like there's no swapping of DNA. Again, if that makes sense. Yeah, so prophase 1, homologous chromosomes exchange genetic information. Yeah, so that's what the swapping is that we mentioned. And then, yeah.
Yeah, that's basically it. So this lecture is the difference between mitosis and meiosis. So again, mitosis is just for like all kinds of cells, except for the sex cells, because meiosis is the sex cells.
Yeah, meiosis produces the gametes, if that makes sense.